We've talked about Splatoon 1 story mode, we've talked about the initial campaign for Splatoon 2, now for the big one. The Nintendo Direct that happened in March of 2018 was pretty good if I do say so myself. Nowadays, the biggest reveal people took away from it was the announcement of a new Smash game, but the info right before that was no slouch either. Splatoon 2 got its 3.0 announcement, new gears, new maps, all that kinda junk. Rank X also got added to the game, and if I still haven't reached it by the time this video comes out, then I've probably given up altogether. The real thing to make Splatoon fans go nuts was the trailer they transitioned to right after. It wasn't immediately clear what the heck was going on, but one thing was for sure from the opening scene: Octolinks were finally playable. The feature that's been wanted since the first Splatoon was finally here, and with it, a new story mode. Watching it today, this trailer still kicks so much ass. It gives off this mysterious vibe, while still supplying enough info to keep us intrigued. All we knew was that this was a new single player story, and Marina and Pearl were somehow involved, along with a returning Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3. Once you finished it, you get to play as Octolinks in the multiplayer, but before all that, it all starts here, in Splatoon 2, Octo Expansion. It would be the first paid DLC for Splatoon 2, but it ended up being the only paid DLC for the game, so whoops. This may be a bit of a twist, but the first time I played Octo Expansion was actually the beginning of this year. For a while, I kinda fell out of Splatoon. I spent a good amount of time on 2, but was somewhat burnt out because I already played a lot of the first game. The big resurgence into my Splatoon obsession was Chuckaconroy's Let's Play of the game. I figured there was no better time to jump back into Splatoon to hype myself up for 3. Once I finished Octo Expansion, the obsession kicked in all over again, and my playtime with 2 skyrocketed this year like you wouldn't believe. There's still some time left before Splatoon 3's release. Let's go ahead and knock out the final story mode we have left to cover. Pale summer moonlight shimmers on the sea floor. An octopus, unaware that dawn will bring capture, rests within a trap, dreaming fleeting dreams. That is the opening text, as we open our eyes to Captain Cuttlefish, being right at our face as we're on the ground. According to him, we were in the middle of a fight with Agent 3 in Octo Valley, before getting interrupted by a mysterious third party, and next thing you know, us and Cuttlefish have been stranded in this unknown place. Calling a truce with the old squid, he introduces himself before asking who we are. Turns out, we've lost all our memories, leaving us a blank slate, transitioning us to the character creator. You can choose between a boy and a girl, but unlike the Inklings, you only have 2 hairstyles per gender, which is kind of lame. Not the biggest fan of the boys options either. I like the afro, but it doesn't exactly have any Octolink features added to it. Some little tentacle bumps would have been nice. Visually, what differentiates the Octolinks from the Inklings is that their eye masks don't connect and have a different shape, as well as having rounded ears, and the standard tentacle count for their hair is 4 instead of 6, making 8 limbs in total for obvious reasons. I will say, the standard hair for the Octolink girl is honestly perfect. It's not ginormous like hair on the enemy designs, and it's got a great blend of looking like conventional hair while having an octopus shape. I picked the girl Octolink, and now here I am. Cuttlefish says that we were humming Calamari Incantation before I woke up, a song that apparently had a massive cultural effect on the Octolinks that heard it during the final battle of Splatoon 1. With this realization, Cuttlefish accepts us as a fellow friend, dispelling any beef we might have had as potentially an Octolink soldier. Exploring the area, we appear to be in an abandoned subway station. Following a trail of ink through the tunnels, a panel on the floor supplies us with a Splattershot Jr. to give us a brief refresh on the basics of Splatoon's gameplay. Venturing further, an old-fashioned telephone is ringing in this vast, empty area. Through the poorest attempt to sound hip with the kids, the phone welcomes us to the Deep Sea Central Station. His job is to guide us on our journey to reach what he calls the Promised Land, presumably being Gigapolis. We must first prove ourselves worthy to make it there. According to the phone, we are the 10,008th applicant in this strange trial, leading Cuttlefish to give us the name of Agent 8, as it lines up with the last number of their applicant name. This doesn't mean there's an Agent 5, 6, and 7, and no, Pearl and Marina are not considered agents. We're supplied with both a CQ-80 and a CQ card as the train arrives to pick us up. With no other real option, entering the train leads us to meeting its conductor, a little sea slug named Sea Cucumber. I just want to take a moment to appreciate this design. It's truly brilliant. The little guy explains that this facility is run by the Chemical Corporation. The Deep Sea Metro subway station connects together test chambers that applicants of the telephone's game must go through. Passing these tests will lead them to collecting the 4 Thangs, yes, that's how it's pronounced, and once all 4 of them are collected, the promised land will open its way to us. How Octo Expansion works is that instead of a couple hub areas that lead to linear levels, we're given these connected lines of stations. Before starting a station, you're dropped off at a platform where you decide what your weapon is. Instead of being assigned a single weapon most of the time in Octo Canyon, you're given up to 3 different weapons that the station will be designed around. Once you pick your weapon, you'll pay your CQ points, this game's currency, and then begin the station, earning more CQ points back once the mission is completed. In a clever way, choosing your weapon at the start sort of acts as a difficulty selector. The recommended weapon will more often than not give you the easiest time, while the weapon that rewards the most CQ points will be the hardest. I really like this way of creating your own difficulty, a lot more to it than a basic hard mode. Not that always picking the recommended weapon will make Octo Expansion easy because, well... Octo Expansion is hands down the hardest single player experience you will ever have with Splatoon, and it's not even a contest. The previous 2 campaigns kept in mind that this could be your first time playing Splatoon, so they were really never much of a challenge. Octo Expansion, however, assumes you're well experienced with the game at this point, and even then, it's still likely to push you to your limits at points. The first station is pretty simple. You get a splatter shot and you gotta make it to the end. The only enemies here are rival Octolings that look a bit different. Must have done something with their hair. This challenge is already harder than anything in Octo Canyon because the AI is way more aggressive than before. You're not gonna be able to fire recklessly until they die, and most importantly, they now also have access to specials. The final Octoling you fight here is equipped with dualies and an inkjet. Remember that one shot is enough to destroy your armor. Too bad I'm too much of a gamer and there were no match for me. Once at the end, all you gotta do is attack this pen and then touch it to mark its completion, earning ourselves a mem cake. We return back to the metro to do this about 79 more times. There are 80 missions because, haha, funny number 8. That's everywhere in this game, and if I pointed out every instance of this, my mouth would get drier than it already is. After finishing the first station, Cuttlefish's intercom begins picking up communication. Instead of Agent 3 on the other end, it's the superior idol duo, Pearl and Marina of Off the Hook. The 2 are on Mount Nantai as they discovered a radio connecting us to them. We tell them about our current predicament, and now we have contact with them for support. It always did feel kind of unfair to me how Pearl and Marina didn't get to be in the single player Splatoon 2, because the Squid Sisters were back again, with a story that wasn't very unique from before. Them finally becoming main characters in the campaign was really exciting for me as a result. Despite all I've said, this is where the journey really begins, as we can now reach the 4 Thangs however we want, as you're immediately offered a split path for the stations. So now seems like a good time to start talking about a number of them. I'm tearing the bandage off right away, 8-ball missions. So you know stuff like the ball puzzle from 06? Yeah, this is the Splatoon version of that. You gotta navigate a giant 8-ball all the way to the end of a stage. You mainly move it by using your weapon. If the ball falls off the map at any moment, the bomb attached to your back kills you. Yeah, we're going full on death game here. These levels can be really stressful at first, but as long as you're not reckless and plan out your pushes with the ball, these can be pretty fun. It's not like the ball physics are hard to understand either, and they can get pretty creative with this one station that's basically just a game of billiards. There's a good number of stations like these that are just unique minigames, like, wait, this one is just Breakout, and this one is... I don't know what it's called, but I'm sure it's an existing game. Another portion of them are these quick challenges that'll have you do something like break all the targets or crates under the time limit. These are short bursts of challenge, and that pretty much describes a lot of the stages in Octo Expansion. Like this one, where you're weaponless and have to not get hit at all for 30 seconds. This felt impossible at first, but pro tip, stay towards the back. The bullets will either have disappeared by then, or bounce low enough that you can jump over them. Do not be swayed by the bonus eggs. They are the devil. There's another station similar to this, except we're using the inkjet. This special gets so much love in this campaign, as there's a number of missions where you use it for an unlimited time, through a whole obstacle course. I didn't think too much about this special in multiplayer, but it's so much more fun to use here. It's got this nice weight and momentum to it, and pressing jump will give you a burst upwards, leading to platforming way more inventive than most of what the previous campaigns offered. They use it to great effect with this rematch you have with the Octo Shower, completely changing how you approach this fight. It's a thrilling as heck encounter that keeps you moving. The other special that gets a similar love is the Baller. You're a giant hamster ball that has to race towards the end. The ball can explode as many times as it wants, but stage hazards can easily bump you off the stage. There's also a boss rematch with the Octo Samurai as the Baller. You can't take any damage, but his hits will send you flying! Going back to the target stages, the longer versions of them will usually put you on an automated platform and rails, and you have to make sure not to miss a single one on your path. For this playthrough, I decided to tackle this one station using the Bamboozler. I do not recommend this. This took countless attempts on my part. I am not a bamboo player. I am not a charger player. I want to try the bow and arrow in 3 releases, but right now, I am not the marksman this mission wanted me to be, but through sheer determination and my big brain, I did it. But while I'm being dramatic, this wasn't even the hardest mission for me to complete, where I tried the hardest weapon. No, that was this pain in my side. With the Dynamo Roller, I'm supposed to kill 3 waves of enemies, and starting out, it's not so bad. Even with the second wave, it's manageable enough if you get the jump on them. The third wave though, this stupid Gatling gun and the far off sniper with the splash walls in front of them, the Dynamo is way too slow for this. It often took me multiple hits to kill the first guy, and then swing after swing after swing to take down the sniper and his stupid walls. My mobility is shit, and it was a constant struggle that would inevitably lead to my death. And then I used a Stingray they give you, and it ended up being pretty simple. I kind of ruined my throat for nothing tonight. I need a drink of water, hold on. Besides this one moment, the Octo Snipers are actually a lot more fun to fight here. Previously, they were a basic obstacle that encouraged you to keep moving. Here, however, they'll put you in areas that'll leave you largely outnumbered, leading you to strategize how you'll take them out, one by one. You gotta remember that in Splatoon, you die fairly easily. Enemies can shred your armor and then easily pick you off in your critical state. Armor is rarer than it's ever been. I only have one clear memory of having fully stacked armor, and that was the first level. You're not going to be powering through enemies like the other campaigns, and that also goes for the rival Octolings. I've already touched on them briefly, but a couple of stations will have you dealing with them. You got this one linear stage based off the opening tutorial, but now modified to be much harder. They're also involved in the most infamous part of this whole game, but we'll save that for a bit later. Another time the Octolings are used are for these challenges where you basically have to play either Tower Control or Rainmaker, but you have no teammates. These missions were always subpar if you ask me. You're given more than enough time to complete the objective, and the Octolings don't put that great of a fight here. It's more annoying than anything to have to swim all the way back after a death in the Rainmaker stages. These are the only times the multiplayer maps are used in this campaign. It's taken me a while to actually talk about them, but a lot of stations are the linear levels you're familiar with from the other campaigns. In terms of the level design itself, it's a vast step up from the levels of 1 and 2, even with the improvements Octo Canyon made. All the previous mechanics return, but they're used in a lot more interesting scenarios that make them a lot more difficult. You know, the creative kind of difficulty, and not the frustrating kind. Except this part, I hate it. Remember all the praise I gave towards 2's levels in that video? And times that by 3 for these levels. There's not any collectibles in these levels besides eggs, so the optional secrets aren't as high as the previous story mode, but these are still easily the best designed levels Splatoon has had. There's no new bosses in any of these stations, however. I've already brought up a couple of the rematches using the specials, but you still got some bosses that are simply harder versions. The Octo Stomper is back for a 3rd time, and puts up more of a fight than ever before, now throwing bubbles into the mix. Kinda crazy how the first and easiest boss from Octo Expansion is now the hardest fight here. The Octo Oven is a bastard now. As the fight goes on, it'll start adding sprinklers, splash walls, and snipers all around it. And dang does this get overwhelming. It took me a while my first time, but getting those last hits is so satisfying. Alright, it's now later. Girl Power Station! By this point, you likely already did this pretty annoying turret station where you gotta protect this ball from all the projectiles coming at it. This station could be its own can of worms, trust me, but once you figure out the arc of the missiles, it becomes manageable. Now for Girl Power Station, protect this orb once again, but now on foot where you get to pick any of these 9 weapons, as a bunch of Octolings will be coming at the ball to destroy it. Tower defense at its finest, and from what I've gathered, this is considered the most frustrating and most evil station in the whole game. I beat it on my first try when I first played this game. Yeah, I don't feel as resentful towards this mission, as many others likely are, even after coming back to it for this video. I'm not gonna say that people simply need to get good, but it is a mission that you will likely need to learn. You're given a bunch of armor and special cases to use however you want, and all the Octolings come in a specific order at said locations, so reacting to them becomes easier once you know where they spawn, and which ones are a higher priority. Yes, the Octolings have a bunch of different specials that can end up shredding the orb if you let them get to it, and once you get overwhelmed, it can become basically impossible to win. But figuring out how to prevent this checkmate situation is what this station is all about. It can be very frustrating if you keep going in, expecting to win by merely fighting and reacting better. Figure out those new angles instead of bashing your head against the same strategies, and this station really won't be that bad. That mentality really is the cornerstone of a lot of Octo Expansion's difficulty. It can't be denied that there is a certain level of trial and error for a number of missions, but checkpoints are frequent, so you're almost always back to where you died in no time. I like to compare this difficulty to games like Celeste, where it's about thinking your way through scenarios, while also being extremely fragile. It's one of my favorite forms of challenge, so you can chalk that up to why I enjoy Octo Expansion so much. It's a very well-tuned difficulty for anyone who loves the gameplay of Splatoon. Most of the time. Regardless, there's no better feeling than finally passing a station that kicked your butt and getting that catchy as hell victory jingle. Every time you pass a station, you're rewarded with a mem cake. These are small figures that are modeled after characters and objects in the world of Splatoon. Attached to them are these 3-line poems, focused on the objects and how our player character feels about them. It's not anything to the level of Suckin' Scrolls, but a number of them are nicely written, and it doesn't hurt to look through them every now and then. You're rewarded with new gear from multiplayer every time you complete a full set of mem cakes from my Padre, another passenger of the Deep Sea Metro. For as minor as his character is, I really enjoyed his presence, a giant isopod that was once a fellow test subject trying to reach the promised land like yourself, but gave up ages ago and has been losing a grasp on his memories since. In a way, sharing these mem cakes acts as a means of helping him maintain some semblance of memory, and I thought it was fascinating enough for what it is. There's no big hub areas like Octo Valley or Canyon for you to explore. Besides the empty central station, your main hub will be on the metro itself, and you only have access to 2 cars. It's a very claustrophobic environment compared to the previous 2 story modes, but I believe that was the point. The Deep Sea Metro is purposely not a comforting place. It's the Splatoon equivalent of the actual Deep Sea. It's where you'll find all these sea creatures with designs very different from anything you saw in Inkopolis. I like all of them as designs, but their strangeness further heightens how far away you are from the promised land that you yearn for, with the only glimmer of hope being this magazine that acts as a clever way of allowing you to exit the DLC. You can tell from the neon lights and colors that Octo Expansion is going for an 80s aesthetic for its presentation, and it's one that gives an identity to this campaign. The same could be argued for the music. Splatoon music is known for being kinda weird, but Octo Expansion is its own brand of strange. The level themes are all done by the in-universe musician, Deadfish, an Octoling with a really cool design from the artwork that's been shown. They don't actually appear in game, and despite being such a, quite frankly, non-existent character, they're pretty popular within the community, so hey, good for them. I know you probably hear a number of YouTubers say this, but as someone who's not an expert in criticizing music, a lot of it sounds very techno or vaporwave-esque. I don't really see myself going back to listen to a number of these tracks in a normal situation, but they're phenomenal at enhancing the strange and surreal feel of playing this game. The level track that makes an exception to what I said, and one that I go back to all the time, is the music for the 8-ball levels. It's got this lo-fi feel to it that's very relaxing, while still reminding you of the hopeless situation you've got yourself placed in, and all you can really do is keep moving forward. I've mentioned that you're rewarded with a mem cake from each station, but after completing a certain amount of missions, you'll receive chat logs between Pearl, Marina, and Captain Cuttlefish. They'll talk about a number of things related to your situation, but eventually, they'll get into having a lot more general discussions. This is where we get a lot of fleshing out for Off the Hook as a duo. We'll learn about their origins as a band, including Marina's backstory as part of the Octarian army before abandoning it and meeting Pearl on Mount Nantai. They go into good detail about all the little parts of their story, and I found it really endearing. These chat logs were the personal highlight of this story for me. These are the most we've ever seen of character interactions and development between characters in this series yet. There have always been glimpses of this throughout, but they've always put forth world building and lore above everything else. Most of the dialogue in the previous story modes existed to primarily give exposition or be a progress check. Character dynamics and personalities felt pretty basic at the start. I know some may bring up the Squid Sister stories, but besides not even being in the game itself, a lot of it was simply narration over a string of events, with very little scenes getting fleshed out really, if you get what I mean. Octo Expansion has given us the best chance for these characters to simply talk to each other and understand their relationships. Of course, when I say characters, I obviously mean Pearl and Marina, because you can tell Cuttlefish gets pushed aside at a certain point. These two are hands down my favorite characters in Splatoon. These chat logs really highlight the inseparable bond these two have. Even with Pearl learning about Marina's past as an Octoling, it doesn't change a thing about how she feels about her. They're a pairing that I found stood out a lot more compared to the Squid Sisters. Of course, those two work as the iconic first duo to get you familiar with the concepts of idols in Splatoon, but after that first establishment, they were able to do something a lot more unique and interesting with Off the Hook in my opinion. There's a reason the final Splatfest of 2 wasn't Pearl versus Marina. With all we know about their relationship, it simply wouldn't make any sense. All of this makes the final results, where it's declared that Off the Hook will be sticking together forever, all the more touching. It's no wonder so many people ship these two together. Hell, it can be argued Nintendo does as well in certain cases. I really hope Splatoon 3 adds some sort of equivalent of this with its story mode. We already know Sunken Scrolls are returning, but I think that these chat logs have set a new standard for character interactions that should be followed up on. The only other part of these chats that I want to note is learning that other Octolings have been arriving in Ingopolis and have been participating in turf wars. To me, this works in both a literal and meta way. It tells you how other Octolings like yourself have been making it to Ingopolis and have becoming part of its society, but also that others have been finishing Octo Expansion and been unlocking Octolings as characters. It's kinda cute in that way. Once you've collected the 4 things, which by the way aren't actual challenges, it's just going through a hallway and grabbing the piece, which is kind of underwhelming. But anyway, the telephone puts them all together in order to form a blender. They say to go inside to be taken to the promised land, but if it wasn't obvious already, this is all a trap in order to have us blended alive. Considering we're the 10,008th test subject, you can probably figure out what happened to a good number of the previous participants, as grim as it is. Before we get smoothied, we get saved just in the nick of time by Agent 3, who finally makes their debut in this DLC. You can actually customize Agent 3 yourself after completing enough missions. If you have your own interpretation of what Agent 3 looks like, you're free to make it here. I personally tried to stick close to what I had back in the Splatoon 1 video, aka the Inkling Girl version. Their badassery is cut short, as they get knocked out from destroying the blender with just their body, good lord. Luckily, they had a CQ-80 on them with the blueprints of the whole facility. While Cuttlefish stays with 3 while they recover, 8 begins their escape to the surface. Thus begins the final challenges of the game. In order to make it to the top, you have to go through 7 different levels that are the culmination of everything you learn throughout the game. Starting out, you don't even have a weapon on you. As a first, there's a whole stealth section where you can't be spotted by any enemies unless you want to face a barrage of gunfire and bombs. With how being submerged in ink works in Splatoon, this ends up feeling very natural. I don't really have any complaints with this section, it's just pretty well designed. The atmosphere during this whole section feels intimidating, like you've now gone somewhere you were never meant to be in. It's by the second section that you start getting a means of fighting back, But I like how you get the splat bombs before you get any guns, forces you to put that throwing arm to the test. Once you finally get an Octo shot equipped, it's like a new sense of power flows within you, which soon leads you to the next area. By this point, the level design is holding nothing back. These are tightly knit together obstacle courses that'll make you use all your abilities and movement options to their fullest. There's even a number of new obstacles like these instant kill lasers. It can feel very tense to maneuver around them, but quick thinking and wit feels rewarded. All while during this, a new off the hook song is playing, Nasty Majesty. Most will likely recognize it from the trailer for Octo Expansion, but it's used just as well in the game itself. It has a very rebellious sound to it, extremely fitting for what's essentially a fancy prison escape. The second half of these levels gets a bit different. It starts with the final inkjet section of the game, and then an escort of this ball of energy, without having it get damaged too much. It can be a bit frustrating to deal with enemies, but as is familiar with Octo Expansion, it's better to think outside the box for what is the safest way forward. Also, don't miss out on these balloons, as they usually have good items in them. Another off the hook track is playing here called Shark Bites, a song that I love even more than Nasty Majesty. It's got a rebellious feel similar to that song, but the stakes just feel so much higher as I listen to this one. You are done being just another lab rat. Your chance at freedom is now, and nothing will stop you from having it. As the only original boss in the game, awaiting us at the 7th section is a possessed Agent 3. The telephone ended up sanitizing them with a green goop that also tied up Captain Cuttlefish, which is pretty standard now. There's a novelty about fighting a previous player character that I really love, and sanitized Agent 3 scratches that itch perfectly, especially with the remix of Splatak. Defeating Agent 3 cures them with a phone scoop, but they're once again knocked out. Finishing our ride up the elevator takes us to the outskirts of Ingopolis, very early in the morning. Pearl and Marina are there to pick us up, but since that boss wasn't climactic enough, the phone returns oozing with that green goop 3 was infected with. Its name is revealed to be Commander Tartar, an AI created by a professor long ago. If you've been keeping track of your Splatoon lore, you'll likely come to the conclusion that this is the same professor that put Jet away. Their mission was to pass down humanity's knowledge down to the next species worthy, but was repulsed at Inkling and Octoling society for their behaviors. So instead of that, they've decided to create a new life form themselves. One that's created from the ooze that's made from blending test subjects. It's not a stretch to say that all the enemies you face, including the humanoid Octolings, are all zombified versions of themselves, created from Tartar. Incredibly dark, even for Splatoon standards, but Tartar's next plan is pretty simple by comparison, and it's to fire a giant laser at Ingopolis with a giant statue that resembles a human. Like, oh my god, what a jump. Marina quickly devises a plan for how we're gonna stop this. Since the laser is being powered by sun rays, we'll have to ink the whole statue before it reaches max power. As unorthodox as it is, Agent 8 is experiencing their first turf war right here and now. As the final mission, we have to go around this whole statue and shoot all these bombs that'll explode ink. They'll all be sent in a sequential order, and you have only 3 minutes to shoot them all. You'll be going from one part of the bus to another until it ends with you circling the head on grind rails. I'll admit there is some trial and error to this whole finale. You're likely going to fail at least once, since you'll need more time to better understand where each set of bombs will end up, but once you understand what to do, this flow state starts getting developed. The urgency has never been higher in any of these story modes. You're no longer just fighting for a power source, you're fighting to save all of Ingopolis from complete annihilation. The song playing in the background, Fly Octo Fly, is a track that's been alluded to all throughout the game, as both the victory jingles for completing stations and collecting things. It would be the most hyped song in the whole game, if the next song didn't exist. During the last minute, we get a new rendition of what is arguably Off the Hook's most iconic song, Ebb and Flow. It acts as Off the Hook's equivalent to Calamari Incantation, but goddamn, I love this song so much more. Something about Off the Hook's vocals has so much more personality. Pearl's vocals are very quick and to the point, fitting for her status as a rapper, and the more rambunctious of the two. Marina's vocals often will hold notes for much longer, and generally sings more smoothly. Combining these two into one song makes for a track that has an endless amount of charm and hype behind it. Words don't do justice the goosebumps I get when this song is reaching its climax. It's been a long and difficult journey, but here we are as this one Octoling is saving the world while the two coolest cephalopods out there are singing their hearts out for you. The best finale for a Splatoon story yet, and one of my personal favorite finales for a game. Pearl's ridiculous laser battle with the statue being the icing on the cake. Tartar is defeated, and the day is saved. Agent 3 wakes up again, with Agent 8 greeting them with a warm smile, thus concluding Octo Expansion. The credits this time are really nice. You don't paint them like last time, but instead, you have all the main characters staring over the world that they just saved, and the new home of Agent 8. The different graphics for all the names of the teams is also quite cute. Finishing Octo Expansion, of course, lets you now use Octolings as your player avatar. I was an Inkling boy for most of my Splatoon life, but here I am now as an Octoling girl. The pipeline is real. Besides that though, there are some neat bonuses. There's now a vending machine in the central station where you can spend CQ points. It'll randomly give you any bonus items from cash, food tickets, ability chunks, you get the idea. A bunch of stations previously played will now be marked, and if you go back there, you'll get a token, which is pretty much just for the vending machine. Yeah, it's not really that exciting. If you want to quote unquote 100% Octo Expansion, then you would be doing every single mission with every weapon possible for it. Don't do this. You only get like a name thing right there, and yeah, that's it. The more exciting bonus can be found when inspecting the 8th locker here. If you thought fighting against Agent 3 was too easy, well, here's the Super Boss version, Inner Agent 3. Besides the AI being a lot more aggressive and slippery to hit with its dodge rolls and it's annoying as hell, they now make frequent use of auto bombs, have 5 phases instead of 4, and have a new set of specials, which are often way more annoying to deal with. This is easily the hardest fight in the whole series, and you will die at least a couple of times before you get the fight down. A true final test of your skills, and finally beating it filled me with a great amount of satisfaction. This little golden toothpick here was the reward for all my hardships. Splatoon 2 Octo Expansion is my favorite DLC I have ever played for a game. Everything that the previous story modes did, this story mode does 10 times better. The plot and characters are far more entertaining, the lore it adds to the series is extremely interesting, the presentation and music is even more stylized than usual, and the level design and mechanics give us a challenge that kept me engaged all throughout. The difficulty may turn off some people. I definitely wouldn't recommend this as your return to Splatoon if you've been unfamiliar with this series for a while. This is for the people like me who have this insane love for Splatoon, or those who finished the story mode of 2 and wanted something much more from it. This is currently the peak of Splatoon single player, and I feel any fan of the series should give it a shot. I can only hope that Splatoon 3 story mode will continue to try new and creative things like Octo Expansion did. I don't think it will top this DLC, but as long as it's a fun time with its own original elements, I'm sure it'll be good. Regardless, that'll be a tale for later. Until then, make sure to stay fresh, and don't get cooked, stay off the hook. Welp, that seems like a good place to call it for this video. If you like what I do, subscribing would be very appreciated. If you have anything you want to say about Splatoon or Octo Expansion, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll make sure to keep an ear out, and heck, I may even reply. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.